Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest today is Daniel Hawkins, Speaker of the House, 100th District in Wichita, and it's Friday afternoon. And Dan, I know you've had a long week, and a lot of long weeks up here, and you're on your way back, and I can tell when you came in you were pretty tired.
I'm pretty tired this week. We had a big week. This is our 11th week, believe it or not. It just seems like yesterday we started, but it's we've covered a lot of territory over this last 11 weeks, and usually by the end of the week, I'm ready to go home.
Yeah. And I always appreciate you taking time to come by and share with us, because this goes out, and there's newspaper articles that come out, and sometimes they're a little different than what took place, and so I always like to have the idea that the Speaker of the House will come in, stop, and he'll say, here's what's going on,
yep,
good or bad or otherwise. And so where do you want to go today?
We have a lot of stuff that's happened this last week. In fact, kind of where I'd like to start is on taxes. Yesterday, our tax committee finally got our tax package out. When we started this year, there were three things that we wanted to do. We wanted to put some more money into our rainy day fund, our budget stabilization fund. We wanted to, of course, take care of the sales tax issue, pay off some more debt. But in addition to the sales tax on food, we really wanted to come out with a single rate. People call it a flat tax, but it's really just a single rate tax. The committee finished their work yesterday, passed it out. So we'll probably see that on the floor sometime next week, probably Tuesday, I would imagine. Tuesday is going to be a big day. But this flat tax is something that has had a lot of play over the years, and nothing ever happens with it. And I think the time is right. The Senate President and I have been negotiating with the governor, talking about the single rate tax. She's not all that fond of it, but I think that if we get the right package in front of her, I think she really will take a good look at it. The Senate came out with and this was early on in the session, they came out with a tax package that was really too expensive. It was a 4.75 single rate over, and there were a lot of things added to it. They really loaded it up, and by the time it was all said and done, it was like $1.2 billion expense per year. So over $3 billion, $3.6 billion or so over a 3-year period, which is just impossible for us to do. We have to be careful. We have to be conservative when we do these things, because revenues don't always stay the same, and all this money coming in from the federal government is finally starting to end. And so we really have to make sure that when we do something that we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about what could happen from an economic standpoint, a recession. So we got to be really, really careful. So this single rate that they came out with yesterday was a 5.25. We're currently at 5.7. There's actually three rates. It starts out at 3.1 for the lower income, 5.25, and then 5.7. And what they did was they shifted if you saw a graph, I wish I could get you the video, because our tax chairman did a great video explaining it. But you shift on the bottom end, the amount of income that's excluded from income tax. And what he did is he moved that from around $3,000 up to $6,150. For an individual, is $12,300 for a family, and that allows us to bring that a single rate in and provide an income tax relief for every person along that continuum from the lowest income to the highest income. So they got that done yesterday, but they added several other things that were necessary to it. One of the things that we've talked about a lot over this last year, really, and actually since the campaigns, the gubernatorial campaigns of last year, where Derek Schmidt came out with, doing away with the income tax on Social Security. Well, we in our tax package, we didn't actually do away with that. What we did was we took the exemption up to $100,000 and did away with the cliff. The way our current tax law is the first $75,000 is excluded an income for Social Security, but if you hit $75,001, you pay tax clear back to the beginning. So we did away with that cliff to where now you can make up to $100,000 in Social Security or in total income, and be on Social Security and not pay income tax on Social Security up to that $100,000. So that was really a good piece. We also increased the standard deduction. We also exempted the first $65,000 on property tax. It was $40,000. We moved it up to $65,000. So we're given some relief on property tax, the most hated tax we have.
Oh, I would imagine that would be true. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Dan Hawkins with Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. This is Friday afternoon, visiting with Dan Hawkins, Speaker of the House. And Dan, you just come back from Topeka. You're on your way back home. You're the 100th District in Wichita, so you got quite a ways to go yet. And where else do you want to go to? Because I know you've been awfully busy.
We have. We've been doing a lot of things having to do with women and women's rights. The Senate passed a Women's Bill of Rights. We will be taking that up this next week in our debate on the floor. And a lot of people would think, what is that about? Well, really, it's about making sure that women are protected. It's really a protection issue. You know, with some of the way our world is going today, there's biological males that are actually going into women's bathroom and using them because they're, transgender people, and that a lot of times that sends a lot of fear into our women. And so a lot of this is really about making sure that women have a space when it comes to bathrooms, locker rooms, women in prison. Really just making sure that women are taken care of. I'm not sure why we've kind of gotten into this situation where people think that it's a good thing to have a biological male in women's space, but it's the way our world has gone today. And so this bill is all about protecting women. We also, if you remember, actually quite a few weeks ago, we passed the Fairness in Women's Sports. And last Friday was a huge day for us when the governor vetoed that again. That sent us into a tizzy. We were scrambling. We really kind of thought maybe she might not veto it. You know, she has vetoed it the last 2 years. During her campaign, she says, of course, men should not compete against women's sports. Well, campaign's over. She's back to Governor Kelly, and she went back to her same way of vetoing that bill. So this next week, we will be working really hard to override that veto. We have not been able to do it in the past, but there's one thing different. There's some different people in our midst this year, and we actually had one Democrat that voted for that bill when it came through. We think that there could be a couple of Democrats that actually vote for the override. And so we believe we have a really good chance of overriding that veto, but you never do know until you get down to doing it, making sure everybody comes along. We do have a couple of Republicans who have continued to not vote with us on that, and I don't anticipate that they're going to change their mind. But nobody, when you go out and you talk to people across this state, and it crosses all ideological barriers, people believe that women's sports is meant for women, not a biological male that now identifies as a female to be able to compete. During all of that debate, we had a young lady from, I want to say it was University of Kentucky, but don't hold me to that, but I think that's where she is from. Her name is Riley Gaines, and she came in and spoke about her experience in competing against Leah Thomas. And literally, Leah Thomas was a male all up to the senior year of college, then decides to identify as a female, competed in swimming, and really just kind of wiped out the women, much stronger than the other women. And so, that's something that we really believe that we have to do. So that's something we're going to be working on really hard next week. When we go into that, we'll probably have to do what we call a call of the house, lock the doors, keep everybody in there until we get it done.
I appreciate the fact that you're doing that, because as you were talking about this, I'm thinking, how hard many women work and young women work in athletics in their sports, and then here comes somebody that's a male that okay, now I'm a female, and comes in and dominates that. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. To me, it doesn't seem like that's fair.
It's not. It truly isn't, because just because you are transitioning or may have already transitioned doesn't mean that body is not a lot the same. The muscle mass is still there. The skeletal differences are there. Their strength, they're still most likely stronger than their women counterparts. And so it just does put women at an unfair advantage. We worked so hard through all of these years, the last 40 years, of making sure that, especially women in sports, Title IX and all of those things, that women had the opportunity to compete against women and not against men, and now all of a sudden that changed on us, and so we believe that this is the resolution to that problem.
Good.
We also got into education this week. We passed our K through 12 budget. Not only our K through 12 budget, but also we also passed the ESA, educational savings accounts. That was pretty divisive. It's not going to probably hold up to a veto. The veto will come, and we don't have the votes to get the veto override. On the K through 12 budget, though, we fully funded education again. We put $72 million into special education funding. So that's a huge increase over the past. So if she does veto that, she's going to veto that special education funding. We also exempted teacher kids from the open enrollment capacity restrictions. So if you have a teacher that's teaching in a different district from where they live, their kids can go to that same school with them. So it does away with the restriction of them not being able to cross. Allows district-age school kids to participate in district sports. That's really a big deal, because you have a lot of homeschool kids out there that don't necessarily have a place to play sports. This allows any child that is in the district, even if they're homeschooled, to be able to participate in the sports that happen in that district.
That's good.
Does away with the ban on paying school boards. We currently have school boards that may want to pay their school board members some type of a stipend. There's currently a ban on it. That takes that ban away. Quite frankly, those school board members spend an enormous amount of time doing the work they do. People don't really realize that's right now is really a volunteer position, and some of those people are spending 10, 15 hours a week working on those things. And so that does away with the ban on paying for that. Adds transparency. When it comes to curriculum, they have to put the districts have to put their curriculum on their website. So it does away with that.
Okay. All right. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates with Dan Hawkins. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest, Dan Hawkins, Speaker of the House, 100th District, Wichita. And it's Friday afternoon, so Dan, thank you for stopping by. Where do you want to go to next?
Doug, we had a bill that was passed out of the House this week. It was called the Born Alive Protection Act. And really, I think it's hard for anybody to vote against that. In fact, our vote total was actually pretty strong. So you have, a woman in crisis. She decides to have an abortion, and then that baby is born even after they tried to abort it. And we've had lots of instances. In fact, one of our physicians that's a member of the House, his name is Dr. Ron Bryce from down in Coffeyville. He practiced in Texas throughout his whole career. He's now retired and came back home. And he's the one that carried the bill, and he gave such a compelling story. There wasn't a dry eye in the House. It was an amazing story. But abortions do happen, especially late-term abortions, where that child is still alive and born alive. And he told about a situation when he was in practice where they had gotten a code blue, and he went to the operating room and was trying to figure out what was wrong, because The doctors weren't acting like there was anything wrong. The mother, they were working with the mother. The mother was okay. And then all of a sudden he heard the baby cry. And they'd basically set that baby over on a stainless steel table to die. And he immediately went over and started working with the baby. He said normally when you would see that happen, and he said he saw it 27 times during his career. And he said normally they would kind of just be laying there. They weren't crying, they weren't moving, but they were still breathing. This one was different. This one was crying, kicking its legs and hands. He started working with it, took it to the NICU, got it under a heat lamp, started working with it. The baby did end up passing away, but it literally imprinted on his mind just how wrong it is to not provide health care, to provide health services to a baby that in a botched abortion. And so that's what this bill does. This bill basically it provides penalties. It requires a doctor that if a baby is born alive from an abortion, that it gets the same health treatment as any other baby at its age, gestation. So if it's a 30-week or 32-week-old baby, those babies can live outside the womb, and they do today, and so it would get the same exact treatment and being taken care of as a baby, as a like-aged baby. It also provides penalties if a doctor doesn't. It was such a compelling story. Actually, during the debate, the story that he presented, that we had a huge amount of, well, I say huge, there were a lot of Democrats that came on board with us. The Democrats have been talking bad about it the whole time as it was coming up, and they debated it. But we have 85 members in our caucus. We had an 88 vote total, so we had actually had one of our members gone. So we had 4 members of the Democrat Party that came across and voted with us. I do believe that the governor will hopefully sign that and make that into law. It's over in the Senate right now, so we'll have to wait and see what the Senate does with that. But it was one of those bills that we had been talking about all session long, and we just finally got it to where we could get it across the line. So I was pretty happy about that. And I just don't understand how anybody in their right mind would not deliver health care when you have a baby that's born alive, even though it was supposed to be aborted. You've got to give them health care. You've got to give them the treatment that they need to survive.
I can't imagine being a doctor and walking away from that. Well, yeah. There it is. I just can't imagine why you wouldn't put 110% effort in saving that child.
It was interesting after the debate, after it passed, we have a news organization. They call it news. It's actually more of a blog, but they consider themselves a news organization called The Reflector, and they really just kind of beat us up for it. Tried to say that the doctor wasn't correct, that doesn't happen today. I think even the Eagle did that. The Eagle said the doctor's not correct, that doesn't happen today. Well, he would beg to differ with him, because he says, I've seen it happen 27 times. So it does happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen very often. It'd have to be a pretty cold heart not to deliver that care. It really would. So we got that done. That was a really bright spot that day, getting that done. I think everybody felt good about it when we finished the vote and it was over, because it truly did tug at the heart. It really did. We also passed a ESG bill this week. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. And what it is it's actually, there are organizations out there that are judging us all, but particularly certain types of companies. If you're an oil company, they judge you in a certain way and then give you an ESG score in hopes of people not doing business with you. That bill was a very contested bill, but I think it is a very necessary bill. Another place where we really see things happening, you've heard of BlackRock. In our investments in our pension plan, BlackRock was a huge piece of our pension plan. Well, BlackRock literally boycott certain industries and certain businesses because they are doing some type of business that they don't like, having to do with this social, environmental social governance. So this also put some restrictions on our pension plan to where our pension plan is not to use places like BlackRock that are going to use that. It also makes it to where we're going to take back control of our proxy, because we have so many stocks and stocks out there that we invest in, and you give away your proxy and they vote it. Well, you don't know how they're voting it, so we're taking that back control of our proxies and making sure we vote for those stocks in the manner that's right for us.
Good. All right, well, we're going to cut away and take a break, and we're going to be right back and finish up with Dan Hawkins. And Dan, thank you for being here.
Well,
we'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates with Dan Hawkins. And Dan, we're down to about a minute and a half or so to go, and I appreciate you coming by. Where do you want to finish on?
Well, it goes really fast, but I want to talk really quickly about House Bill 2225, which was a transmission line bill. We have transmission lines being built all the time, and our energy companies, our utilities, sometimes we're building them with federal dollars, and we were getting charged like it was state dollars. We made some corrections in that to make sure that the utilities are using the proper program whenever they're funding their transmission lines. Some of them, we have a power pool, Southwest Power Pool. Some of them that go through that are going to get a certain rate of return. The ones that are local get a lower rate of return, but they weren't doing it. They were trying to shove everything through the Southwest Power Pool. So we've changed that. The energy companies came together and they really negotiated, and we got that done. That's going to save our ratepayers $11 million. That was a great deal.
That's a lot of money.
It sure was.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. Well, good job.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Well, Dan, again, thank you so much for taking time to stop by on your way back to Wichita. I know you're the 100th District in Wichita, and thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Doug.
As a Speaker of the House. That's awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you,
Take
sir.
care. See you next time.